Hello, I'm Dr. Russell Barkley, a clinical professor of psychiatry at the Medical University of South Carolina, located in Charleston, South Carolina. Welcome to my internet course on the 12 best principles for the management of the child or adolescent with ADHD. In this course, I'm going to talk about the 12 best principles I have learned over my more than 30 years of clinical practice with families on how to manage ADHD children and teenagers with less conflict and more success. The treatment package of any child or adolescent with ADHD can be boiled down to 5 components, as I've said in other courses on this website. The first is to make sure that you've gotten a proper evaluation of your child by a professional who understands ADHD and its management. The second step in any treatment package is to educate yourself, that is, to become an expert on ADHD. Read widely, visit many websites, learn from the experts, and you will find that truth is an assembled thing. You will have a much better idea about ADHD, and you will be better prepared to deal with your child's ADHD if you get yourself educated. You can begin by even reading my parents' book, Taking Charge of ADHD, the complete authoritative guide for parents. The third component of a treatment package is to consider the possible use of medication. In my experience, 70 to 80% of children with ADHD will require medication at some time during their childhood or adolescence to help with the management of their ADHD symptoms and to improve their effectiveness and success in school, peer relationships, or other settings. So consider the use of FDA-approved medications if they are needed to manage your child's ADHD. You can speak with your physician about the options for medication for ADHD children, or you can take courses on this website that also discuss these medications. The fifth component of a treatment package, and one that will be the subject of this presentation, is modification, learning to modify your behavior so as to modify your child's behavior in order to improve that behavior. You can do this using proactive strategies, which simply means things you do before problems develop in order to head them off. And you can also use reactive strategies, which are the tactics or techniques that you use after a problem has developed in order to help reduce that problem the next time around. Finally, the last component of a useful package for treating ADHD is accommodation. This refers to making physical changes in the environment around the child so as to reduce the likelihood of them being impaired by their ADHD in that situation. For instance, rearranging where your child does their homework may help to improve your child's ability to get their homework done. For instance, placing a clock in front of them that shows how much time they have to get their work done, or using a kitchen cooking timer to achieve the same thing. In school, you can also rearrange the environment by doing such things as having your child sit up as close as possible to the teaching area in the classroom so they can be supervised more frequently by the teacher. These and many other accommodations are covered in my other lectures on this website dealing with home and school management of ADHD. What this slide does, however, is to summarize for you the 5 essential ingredients of a treatment package for the child or adolescent with ADHD. Those 5 again are evaluation, education, medication, modification, and accommodation. Now, the first principle I'd like you to consider about managing a child with ADHD is not one of method or tactic or a management technique that you can use to handle a behavior problem. It's really one of your attitude toward your child and toward their disability. This principle is summarized here as the idea that parents are actually shepherds and not engineers. What do I mean by this? I mean that you need to view your child as a unique combination of your family's genetic traits. Children come to us with hundreds of psychological abilities that are pre-installed in them as a result of who we are and our family background and the talents and traits and personality characteristics and other abilities that have been passed along genetically in our families and have been uniquely combined into this child. Your child is not a blank slate on which you get to write. They are not a lump of clay that you get to sculpt. They are not something that is unformed in childhood and you get to determine the form that they will take. They are unique personalities, unique combinations of abilities, and a lot of this you don't get to determine. So I like to think that a better attitude toward children is not one of engineering or being a sculptor where you get to determine everything about your child. Instead, it is one of being a shepherd. You have been blessed with the gift of having this child. You don't get to determine all of the things about them. You are going to have to adjust to them and deal with them. So you are more like a shepherd who is in charge of a flock of sheep rather than someone who is going to engineer or design what the sheep are going to be. Now let's also understand that your child is a composition not only of their genetic makeup and traits, but also of how these traits interact with your particular family environment. So there certainly is some influence of the family on the child, but it is not a one-way street. Your child also has influences on the family. And this two-way street of the child affecting the family and the family in turn affecting the child is in part determined by your child's own unique attributes, what they bring to the table as unique people. Now, these unique genetic combinations of traits, along with their interactions with your particular family environment, are also going to interact as well with unique events that happen outside the home to your child when they deal with other people, such as in the neighborhood, or in playgroups, or in sports, or in schools. Those interactions or those events are also going to have some influence on shaping who your child is going to be and what they are going to accomplish over time, and even what they're going to know as they grow up. So we're now looking at a three-way combination of things: your child's unique genetic makeup, your family's own unique environment and its interactions with your child, and the interaction of both of those with the unique community that you happen to live in and your child's unique events that they encounter in that environment. So all of this is to say that you don't get to completely design who your children are going to be. They come to you with hundreds of traits, abilities, and talents. Those things are largely not of your doing. They are not determined by how you will raise this child. But those traits are going to interact with what you do and the family environment that you arrange, and that's going to determine the unique makeup of your child. And both of those are going to partly be determined by where you live and what your child encounters when they are outside your home and dealing with other events and other members of the community. So to understand your child and who they will be, you need to understand these three key ingredients and how they interact to shape your child. Once you understand how complex child development actually is, you also understand that there is a part of it that you don't get to determine. And that is largely the genetic makeup of your child. The rest of it, however, you do get to determine, which is the family environment and the settings in which your child is going to grow up, the pastures in life in which your child, as a sheep, is going to mature. So I prefer that you think of your role as a shepherd who gets to determine the pastures in life that your child encounters, rather than an engineer or sculptor that gets to design the sheep or the lamb and gets to engineer the clay or the raw materials into the final sculpture. You don't get that power of being an engineer, but you do have the power of being a shepherd, and it's important that you try to be as good a shepherd as you can in raising that child. So you can see here that we are talking about an attitude toward raising children. I think the shepherd attitude is much more realistic than the engineer attitude toward child rearing. Now, what does it mean specifically in being a shepherd, and how that translates into what you might do to help in raising your ADHD child? First of all, it means that like any shepherd, you have responsibilities. You can't, as one parent put it to me in one of my lectures, you can't just leave them a loaf of bread and go to Las Vegas. That's not going to be good enough. That's not setting a proper environment or pasture to raise your ADHD child in. So you need to concentrate on designing as high quality, safe, nurturing, supportive, and stimulating a pasture as possible. You get to shape that environment, and the environment that surrounds your child and takes shape around them is going to have some influence upon them. You get to determine the pasture, how good it is, what its quality is, how supportive it is, how protective and safe it is for your child to grow up in. This includes the larger community in which you have chosen to live, not just the house and not just the family environment that you create within that house. It includes the neighborhood, the schools, and the larger community where you chose to buy or rent your home. All of those are going to have a significant influence on your child. So spend some time thinking about that the next time you decide to move to a new neighborhood. Make it the best neighborhood you can. The second thing you can do is to create opportunities in that environment for your child to succeed in. That is in part up to you to determine. You can open doors within the household, the community, the school system for your child to succeed and to excel. You do have some influence over those opportunities. Create as many opportunities, open as many doors for potential success as you are able to. You also have a power to encourage certain behavior from the sheep that you are raising, even if you don't get to engineer them. You can encourage certain pro-social behavior, and you can also discourage certain forms of antisocial or ineffective behavior whenever and wherever possible. You do this through what is known as behavior modification, rearranging the environment so that it encourages appropriate and pro-social behavior, and so that it discourages or punishes antisocial behavior. Through that means, you do have some influence over the likelihood that their child is likely to behave properly or misbehave within the family environment and the community. It's also important that you monitor the other sheep your child is hanging around with. You want to make sure that your child is placed within as effective, successful, and pro-social, and generally positive peer relationships as possible. That is something you get to determine. Who is your child going to play with in the neighborhood, in the community? What teams or sports or organizations are they going to participate in? And who else is in those particular peer groups? What kind of school is your child going to? And what kind of other children attend that school? You have some influence over these other peer relationships. Make them the best possible. And if you find that your child is drifting into affiliating with other inappropriate, antisocial, or basically deviant peer groups, then break them up. Forbid your child to associate with these individuals. And don't just forbid them to do so, but arrange for more positive peer groups to substitute for the antisocial peer groups whenever possible. You can also make accommodations within your home and within your community in order to help compensate for your child's deficits. Think about a family that's raising a child with a physical disability where their child may be in a wheelchair and may have difficulty entering certain buildings or shopping areas or schools unless ramps are built into those locations so that the child can enter them unimpeded. The ramp is an accommodation. It doesn't change the fact that the child has a handicap or a disability, but what it does do is to make that disability less impairing in that situation. There are many ways to arrange environments around ADHD children to make their ADHD and its other deficits less likely to result in impairment in that situation, which is to say, more likely to succeed in that situation. We'll discuss some of these accommodations in the rest of this lecture. But you get to make environmental accommodations around your child as a shepherd. So you do get to design the pasture even if you don't get to design the sheep. After you've done all of this, then the next part of taking the parent's or shepherd's attitude is to realize that you've done as much as you can, and the rest may be out of your hands. So, sit back, enjoy the show, appreciate the gift of the child that you've gotten, arrange the highest quality environments you possibly can in which your child has an opportunity to succeed and to be more positively influenced by others who they're going to encounter, and then simply enjoy how it plays out. It's going to be fun if you'll just step back and appreciate the gift that you've been given, because the rest is largely out of your hands. The next principle for understanding and managing a child with ADHD is to understand that ADHD creates a significant problem with your child's internal clock, which is to say with their ability not only to sense time, but more importantly, to use their sense of time in order to guide their behavior when that sense of time is important. Time escapes people with ADHD, and they are not able to deal with it effectively. So you're going to have to find ways to compensate for this broken inner clock and this inability to organize around the sense of time that we possess. And one way to do that is to follow the principle at the top of this slide. Minimize the delays in time and externalize the sense of time. Let's talk about how that might be done. Understand that your child is going to have difficulty waiting for consequences or events that are delayed over time. They're going to have difficulty with what we call deferring gratification. They want what they want when they want it right now, and they can be very impatient in this process. So understanding that this problem with patience and with delay of gratification comes about as a result of this broken internal clock or sense of time is very important in raising a child with ADHD and in dealing with the broken clock. Now, it helps to pay attention to three components of our life, how they are arranged, in order to understand how to deal with this problem with time. Think of it this way. Life comes at us in three pieces. They are the events that are coming at us over time and that we need to prepare for. There are the responses that we prepare in advance in order to deal with these events when they arrive and deal with them effectively. And then finally, there are the consequences that are going to occur for how well we've prepared for these events, the outcomes, if you will. We can think of these three components as E for events, R for responses, and O's for outcomes. Now here's the trick in dealing with ADHD. The closer these three things are to each other, the easier it is for children with ADHD to deal with them. Think of a video game, for instance. The reason children with ADHD are able to play video games for such a long period of time is that video games organize these three pieces very close together in time. Events happen, you respond to them, and there are immediate consequences for what you do. In fact, that's the essence of the enjoyment of the video game. The consequences are immediate, and things are organized very near in time to each other. In fact, when you play these games, you almost lose track of time because you're constantly dealing with these immediate events, responding to them, and getting consequences for what you do immediately. There's often very little planning over hours of time involved in these video games. So, like a video game, you need to arrange tasks and situations so that these three pieces are close together in time. Now, compare that to something like a book report, for instance, where a teacher says, you've got 30 days to read this particular book. Maybe it's the book Sojourner Truth, or Catcher in the Rye, or Harry Potter, for instance, but you've got 30 days over which to organize your life, and prepare your responses, and write your book report. And then, once you turn in your book report 30 days later, it may take the teacher several days or even up to a week to grade all the papers and give the report back to you. So let's look at this from the ERO arrangement. There's an event, the book report. It's been assigned. There's then 30 days between the event and the response, turning in the completed report. And then there's up to a week between the response and the outcome, getting the grade on the book report. Book reports arranged this way immediately disable people with ADHD because they place large chunks of time between the E and the R and the O. The more time you insert between these components of events, of arrangements of events, the more you disable the person with ADHD. So the way to make sure that they are less disabled by this broken internal clock of theirs is to make sure that you put these three pieces together as close as possible and minimize the delays between them. Get the elements as close together as possible in time, and then you will find that they are better able to deal with this situation. Now, how can we do that? How can we minimize delays and externalize time? First of all, I've already mentioned, where possible, shorten the intervals between the events, responses, and outcomes in that situation. One way to do this is to simply make sure that you have broken these longer tasks down into smaller pieces so that you do a piece a day. Let's take the book report to show you how to do this. Instead of assigning the book report over 30 days, we can arrange for this child to sit down with us every day and read 3 pages in the book with us. While the child is reading, they are to write down ideas that they get from the book, the content of the information they're reading, and important pieces of information. Take some notes. When they're done, they can now write several sentences about what they've just read. And then as soon as they finish writing those sentences, you're going to give them 10 or 15 tokens that they can spend to purchase privileges later that day. The tokens become the outcomes or the rewards. They become the access to privileges, sort of like money. So here we've arranged a situation in which a child is going to do a short amount of work. They're then going to read and write down their sentences. That's their response. And then they're going to immediately get a reward or consequences for what they've done. And now you see that we've eliminated much of the delay between the event, reading, the response, writing the sentences, and the outcome, the tokens. And if we do this every day, we will have a child who has a book report done at the end of the 30 days. But if we keep nattering and nagging at the child to do these things, but we don't structure the environment around them to get it done, they're not going to get this book report done in all likelihood. So remember, take extended projects, break them down into smaller pieces, and arrange for these little mini ERO sequences. Do a piece a day, and then when the future gets here, your child is prepared for that assignment and that deadline. Also, if your child has to wait for something, for instance, you may be in a store or a restaurant, and your child has to wait for the consequence or the outcome, one of the best things you can do is to divert their attention away from the waiting period and focus instead on things in the immediate environment around them that may be more interesting to pay attention to. This is a strategy that follows up on the old admonition that a watched pot never boils. If you are waiting for a pot of water to boil on the stove and you keep watching the pot, it's going to feel like it takes forever. But if after you put the pot of water on the stove and you turn the gas on, and then you turn your attention to doing something else, all of a sudden the next time you look at the pot, it's boiling. Time seems to have passed more quickly if you will divert your attention away from the passage of time. So you can help your child during any situation in which they have to wait for something and you can't shorten that interval of waiting time, to simply direct their attention away from the waiting time and to something more interesting to do. And you will find that they are better able to mediate that time period because they've stopped watching the pot and done something else more interesting. They've stopped paying attention to time itself. Now, If your child has to work for an extended period of time, for instance, let's say on getting a homework assignment done, maybe they've got some math work to do this afternoon, but they've got to do this over an extended period of time. One way to help them fix their broken clock is to make the time period physical, to make it represented outside of them in the physical environment. The shorthand phrase for this is to externalize time. One way to do this is with a cooking timer. That old little $5 timer you can buy at Walmart. Simply set the time interval for, say, 10 minutes and place the clock in front of them so that they can see the time period expiring and so that they can watch time pass. This will help them understand how much time they have to get this particular project done, so they don't have to rely on their internal clock for that sense of time passing. Instead, they have an external reference for how much time they have, how quickly it's passing, how much time they have left. You can use various timing devices, clocks, counters, and other things to help with the passage of time. Go to the addwarehouse.com to see some of these timing devices, or as I've said, simply purchase a cooking timer and place it in front of the child. Now don't make the time interval too long. There's a principle I'm going to talk about later in this presentation called the 10 and 3 rule. 10 minutes of work with 3 minutes of break. With an ADHD child, you should break up all chunks of work following the 10 and 3 rule. And if your child is really young, say 5, 6, or 7 years of age, then you can follow the 5 and 2 rule, which is 5 minutes of work with 2 minutes of break, and then 5 minutes of work again. In other words, break the work up into small chunks with frequent breaks, and you'll find your child is much better able to complete the entire assignment if it's broken down into these three pieces. That is, the event, the response, and the outcome are very close together. The 5 and 2 or the 10 and 3 rule. But for now, let's come back to the point I want to make here. Make time physical so that they don't have to rely on the broken internal clock to know how much time they have, how long it's been, and how much time they have left. Minimize delays and externalize time. Now, another principle that I have found to be very useful in raising a successful child with ADHD or a teenager with ADHD is to externalize important information at what I call the point of performance. Let's review this rule. First of all, understand that ADHD creates a problem for a child's working memory. Working memory is one of the major executive abilities of the human brain. It's the ability to hold information consciously in mind that we are using to guide our behavior. It's our intentions, our plans, and our steps to obtaining those goals and following those plans. So this ability to hold in mind where we're going, what we're trying to do, how we're going to get there, is called working memory, remembering to do. ADHD produces a devastating effect on a person's working memory. How can we compensate for that? Well, that's the purpose of this principle. We can compensate for it by making that information external or physical in form. Let's look at this principle further. Instead of relying on your child's working memory, we can make that information much more external. We can write it down, put it within their visual field, at the important point where that information is necessary to know. And then we don't rely on their working memory. The information they need is physically represented outside of them, in their vision, in that situation. There's a physical reminder of what they need to remember to do. So, one way of dealing with a deficit in working memory is to make important rules or other key pieces of information, such as reminders, is to make them physical in a situation where it is important for them to remember something. So we can do this with cards, charts, sticky notes, and so forth. The important point here is the principle. Don't rely so much on internal working memory. but make key pieces of information physical and post that information or that cue or that reminder around the child in the situation where they have difficulty remembering what they're supposed to be doing. I call that situation the point of performance. It's the place in the environment where that child should have recalled that information and didn't. That point or place of performance, of doing what you know, is where you need to post this information. It's where you need to externalize and make physical reminders about what the child is supposed to be doing. So, you can use sticky notes, signs, symbols, cards, sounds, noises, reminders, tape players, but usually something visual or physical will do, like a note card or a sticky note or something else that you put right in the situation that immediately reminds the child of what they're supposed to do. For instance, you could take a card and write down some rules as to that are important to follow as to how to do homework at the kitchen table each evening. Or a teacher could write down the 5 rules for on-task behavior in her classroom when she is teaching, such as stay in your seat, raise your hand if you have questions, follow the rules you've been told by the teacher to do, and so forth. These could be placed on a card and put in front of the child to serve as reminders about the rules in that situation. So again, it's not specifically what you write on the card that's important here. It's the principle of the thing. You have got to make working memory physical. And you do that by externalizing the most important pieces of information and reminders and placing it around your child. Now, another way of dealing with this limited working memory is to rehearse what we call when-then plans in a situation. This will help them to prime their working memory so that they're better able to recall the situation, or the important information rather, in that situation the next time around, the next time they're in that situation. A when-then plan is simply saying, when I'm in this situation again, then I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. So when they're in a situation, and they've been working in that situation, before the situation ends, have them talk out loud to themselves what they're going to do the next time. When I do my homework again, I'm going to get out my materials, review my assignments, stay in my seat, raise my hand if I need help from my parent, and follow through on the rules that I've been given. That's the sort of when-then plan that a child could rehearse so that the next time they sit down to do homework, they're more likely to do what they've been asked to do. You can take virtually any situation and create a when-then plan for a child who is in that situation to help them remember it the next time. So, just remember this. Whenever you're working with your child in any particular task or situation, when the situation is over, make a when-then plan. When I do this again, this is how I'm going to proceed. And you can rehearse that plan several times if necessary before you end that situation. Now, besides externalizing information that's important in working memory, parents also need to understand that they need to externalize motivation. They need to add artificial consequences into situations where consequences don't ordinarily exist, where they are usually delayed, for instance. Now, why do we have to do this? Because ADHD creates a deficit in another executive function or ability, and that executive ability is the capacity for self-motivation, for the internally created willpower, drive, determination, and persistence that we bring to a situation. Whenever we are asked to do work where there is no immediate consequence for getting that work done, humans have to create internal motivation. They have to create the strength, the willpower, the self-discipline to stick it out, get the work done, see that it's finished, and then we wait for the consequences. Many of the things in life that we are asked to do, including in childhood, involve delayed consequences. Think about schoolwork and homework and chores and the other things that children are asked to do. These things have no intrinsic consequences built in them. They're not like video games where something happens as soon as you do something. Instead, they're like most of the tedious or scut work we have to do in life. The consequences are delayed. The things we have to do are very important, but there's no immediate consequence for getting them done. So, in those situations, ADHD makes it much more difficult for your child to persist at doing the work over time, to sustain their attention span over that time, to organize themselves over that time, and to get that work done. It's much, much harder for them, and that is because they lack or are deficient in this internal capacity to create willpower, self-motivation. So, the child with ADHD cannot persist at tasks for very long if the consequences in that task are delayed for getting them done. This helps you to understand why your child with ADHD can play video games for hours or can do things that they really enjoy doing for hours on end, but cannot do their homework or their chores for more than a few minutes. The video games and the enjoyable things provide immediate, pleasurable consequences, but the homework and the chores do nothing. They provide no consequences, and that's why they can't get them done. Their internal motivation is weak, and we have to correct for that. One way to correct for that is to always approach a work situation with a win-win attitude. Getting the work done is a win for you or for the teacher or the other adult authority. It's not a win for the child. So we have to think about making it a win for the child, not just for us. What consequences could we arrange artificially in this situation that could occur immediately for getting the work done? And by doing that, we are more likely to motivate our child to sustain their effort and their work over that period of time to get that work done. So the first way of dealing with a problem with self-motivation that ADHD creates is for the parent and the teacher to approach the situation with a win-win strategy. We have to think of how to make this situation a success for the child. What can they earn for getting this work done? Let's take a look at some of the things that we could do to make motivation external to replace the internal motivation that ADHD children are unlikely to have. When a task must be done for which there is no immediate consequence, then as a parent or a teacher, we are going to have to create an artificial set of consequences. We are going to have to add something into this situation that ordinarily isn't there. We're going to have to make up some consequences. We can do this by using the traditional artificial consequences that many people who understand behavior modification are likely to use. We can use tokens, or points, or stickers, or treats, or snacks, or money, or privileges, or other rewards that this child enjoys doing, and we can make them part of this situation even though they ordinarily aren't involved in this situation. We can reward our child a token for every homework problem they attempt. We can give them points for reading a page at a time in the book report. We can offer them a certain amount of money that they can earn as part of their weekly allowance for getting this situation accomplished. We can tell them that for every 10 minutes they work on a chore or on their schoolwork during their homework, they can earn certain privileges after the work is done, such as for every 10 minutes you work, you get 10 minutes to play your video games, or surf the internet, or text message with your friends on your smartphone, and arranging other electronic privileges. Again, it's not specifically what you do, it's the principle at stake here. You're going to have to inject artificial consequences into this situation in order to motivate this child to sustain their effort over time. So, and then these points, these privileges can be cashed in later for the more salient rewards. But you're going to have to inject something artificial into the chore or the work or the situation. Another way of helping your child with their internal motivation is to have them visualize the goal and the reward before they start to work. So perhaps you've already set it up that your child is going to earn some electronic privileges for getting their homework done. Well, now what you can do at the start of homework is to have your child close their eyes and visualize the game they're going to play, what they're going to do when the work is done. Visualizing a goal, and especially the consequences, the successful rewards for accomplishing the goal, is one way that all normal children learn to motivate themselves. You can do this by having your child consciously practice visualizing the rewards, the goal accomplishment, before they set out to work. And this way you can help pump up their internal motivation. You can also help them pump up that motivation, not just visualizing the goal, but if it's possible, find a picture of it, or take a picture of your child's computer or video game, or cut out a picture of whatever the reward is from a magazine when you happen to come across this particular photograph. Cut it out and put it in front of the child when they're about to sit down and do their work. We all know that having a picture of the reward in front of us is more likely to motivate us to finish that work than if we try to just visualize it on our own, or if we have no image at all before us. Let's say you're trying to lose weight. One thing you can do to lose weight is to take a picture of a thinner individual, like a model from a fashion magazine, and to put it on the refrigerator. That's our goal. That's what we're going to try to look like. That weight, that size. And by seeing that every day, we are likely to motivate ourselves across the day more often than if we didn't have a picture of our goal in front of us. So it's not just children that benefit from visualizing goals and their rewards and having pictures of those goals put in our field in front of us. Children respond the same way we do, and you can boost their internal motivation by using these kinds of strategies. Now, another thing that you can have them do is not just visualize the goal and look at a picture of the goal and the reward, but talk about it. So before they sit down and start to do their work, have them look at the picture and describe to themselves just exactly how they're going to play this game or engage in this reward, or how much they're going to enjoy the reward when they get there. Normal children start to do this at around 4 to 7 years of age. And although it comes naturally to them, it may not come so naturally to your ADHD child. So have them formally practice talking about the goal, describing the reward, and the feeling they're going to have when they're able to get access to that reward, and how nice that's going to feel. So visualize it, put a picture in front of them, talk about the goal and the reward, and you will help to boost their motivation and get them through this work and get them to their goals. You can also assist this process by giving them frequent feedback and encouragement throughout the task while they're performing it. Don't just wait until the end of the task to tell them how they're doing and to give them praise and feedback. Do this at the beginning as soon as they get started. Praise them for starting the project, and then visit them frequently throughout the project or the chore or the homework assignment, giving them frequent feedback along the way. Do this more often, do it quickly, and distribute it throughout the task, and you're likely to find that they're better able to sustain their persistence and their work over time. Now, another principle I'd like you to think about in dealing with a child with ADHD is that if you want to change their behavior, you always start with a reward program first, not with punishment. One of the reasons for that is that ADHD children are punished much more often than other children. Indeed, some research shows that they're punished anywhere from 3 to 8 times more often than other children because of their disruptive behavior. So if they're already being punished more often and you're still having problems, it's very clear that the punishment isn't working. And so if you want to improve their behavior, then obviously it's not going to be through adding more punishment into the situation, because you're already doing that and it's clearly not working. The best way to improve a child's behavior, to change their misbehavior, to get them doing something that they're not already doing, is to start with reward programs first. So if you want to deal with a problem behavior, don't start with punishment for the misbehavior. Start with a reward for the appropriate behavior. So here's what I want you to do. If your child is misbehaving in a certain situation, think about that misbehavior. Now think about what you want your child to do instead. Is it a problem with fighting? Then you want them getting along well with the other child. If it's a problem with lying to you when you ask about what they've done, then you want to reward them for giving an honest report. If the problem is that they don't follow through on a chore or a task, then the goal is to have them follow through on that chore or task. If the problem is that they throw a temper tantrum, or yell, or scream, then instead you want them speaking to you more respectfully, discussing their view of a situation, and otherwise engaging in positive, pro-social behavior. But when you think about a misbehavior, basically what I want you to do is to think about the specific alternative that you want them doing instead. Because once you think about the positive alternative behavior, the next thing you think about is how to encourage it. And that involves rewards, praise, respect, and encouragement. And that tells you what you need to do. You need to show your child the positive behavior that you want in that situation. And then when they show that behavior the next time, you need to reward the bejesus out of it. You need to arrange for lots of rewards and recognition and approval. You need to notice it, praise it, reward it, and even give a privilege for it in order to encourage its use the next time around. So, the way to solve a problem behavior is to think about the positive alternative and then to arrange for positive consequences when you see that alternative occur. Arrange for positive feedback and rewards whenever and wherever you see that positive event occurring. If you ask your child a question and they give an honest report to you, you need to give them praise for speaking honestly to you about what happens. When your child handles a frustrating situation well, you need to notice it immediately and reward it and praise it immediately if you expect that positive behavior of dealing with frustration to improve. Whenever your child is seen getting along with a younger sibling or another child, interacting well with them, you need to stop the flow of behavior and give your child some positive feedback then and there for what they're doing, and even arrange for a reward to be given for what they've done successfully. In other words, you need to start focusing on when positive behavior occurs and stop focusing so much on when negative behavior occurs. Focusing on negative behavior leads to punishment. Focusing on the positive alternative to the misbehavior leads to reward. Always start a behavior change program with rewards. Only when a situation rewards good behavior is punishment likely to succeed in altering misbehavior. This is why parents often find that their punishment doesn't work, and that is because they haven't arranged for any positive behavior to occur, and they haven't arranged for any additional increase in respect, recognition, approval, appreciation, and other positive consequences for the positive behavior. So it's no wonder the punishment doesn't work. Why should it? There is no incentive for this child to behave well. So remember this whenever you have a problem behavior. The best way to improve the situation is through rewards, not through punishments. And once you have lifted the amount of rewards available in a situation for behaving well, then even minor forms of punishment are likely to succeed. Now another thing I'd like you to think about, another rule or principle to follow in raising an effective ADHD child, is to make mental problems and tasks manual. Let's think about why this is necessary. Again, I'll come back to the point that I made earlier. ADHD interferes with working memory. Working memory is that mental capacity to hold things in mind that we're thinking about. It's your consciousness. It's where you think about things. It's the mental chalkboard where you record information that you're trying to think about and work on. That mental chalkboard, that working memory capacity, is a lot like the RAM in your personal computer. That's the active memory where programs are open and working online to solve problems. ADHD reduces your child's RAM, rapid access memory. It reduces their working memory, and so they can't hold information in mind in order to manipulate the pieces of information and in order to help solve the problem. This is why they have trouble doing mental arithmetic or doing any problem solving mentally, because they can't keep the information active in order to hold on to it, play with it, set it up, and solve the problem. This problem is going to interfere whenever they are asked to watch movies, listen to stories, read information, or comprehend what they're what they're doing, or what they're being asked to read. Their working memory is deficient, and the best way to deal with a working memory problem is to make the information physical. Make it manual. Put the pieces of information around them down on paper or on pieces of something. Break the task into smaller units. And by doing that, you are able to allow them to manipulate the task and the pieces of information. We can do this by having them record the information if it's verbal, or if it's not verbal, we can try to find pictures of things so that represent what's involved in the task, and we can have them manipulate these pieces of information. Think about when you go into a furniture store and you want to rearrange the furniture in your living room and maybe shop for a new piece of furniture. One of the things that the salesperson probably will do is they're going to take out what looks like a piece of graph paper on a board, and they're going to help you draw in the dimensions of your living room, and they're going to get out little pieces of furniture, two-dimensional pieces of furniture, and you're going to rearrange that furniture on that form board in order to play with the information, to think about how you would like to rearrange that furniture and what new pieces are likely to fit into that rearrangement. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about doing here for your ADHD child. Make the pieces of the problem physical so they can manipulate it with their hands and solve the problem. So, think about the problem. Think about how you could make the pieces of information important to the problem physical in some form. Could you use pieces of paper? Could you use geometric shapes? Could you use forms? Could you draw pictures? Could you use 3x5 file cards and write the words on it? It doesn't really matter how you do it. The point here is to make it physical. And then as they solve the problem, they can manipulate the pieces of the information manually in order to help solve the problem. So one way to think about this, for instance, is think about a math problem. What could you put around a child to help them do mental arithmetic? Well, you could put a number line in front of them if they have to do addition and subtraction. You could give them a set of marbles, or just a set of dried beans out of a bag of beans, or pieces of rice from dried rice, and simply have these things around so that they could add them, subtract them, create sets with them, and so on, in order to help them do the arithmetic problem. They could even have an old abacus, that old Asian tool of beads that are on spindles, and they can simply move the beads back and forth as they count, add, and subtract. This is simply to illustrate the point I'm trying to make here. By giving them physical devices that can help them with the information and with manipulating the information, they're going to be better able to solve the problem. Now, let's suppose it's a word problem. Let's suppose they have to think about a story that they have to create, or they have to write a report on something they've just read. Take a stack of 3x5 file cards and have them simply write down different thoughts on different cards. And they can do it in any order. As any thought comes to mind, jot it down. And they don't have to write in full sentences, just a couple of words and shorthand phrases, or even little pictures that they draw can help them remember that information. But get it all down. Now that it's all down on different cards, you can rearrange the cards to start to create the outline of a story. And then they can sit down and start to write out the story or type it into a word processor. Word processors are great for doing this because you can actually manipulate the information by using the cut and paste functions in your word processor. But again, it's not specifically what you do. It's the principle of the thing. Make as much information physical so they can manipulate it with their hands and keep it in front of them, and they're more likely to get the problem solved. Now here's another crucial principle, I think, in dealing with an ADHD child. One of the things that we find with parents and teachers about ADHD kids when they manage them is they talk too much. They yak rather than act. They natter and nag and remind and explain and cajole and repeat themselves endlessly as if more words are going to get this child to do what they're supposed to do. For instance, you want your child to clean up their bedroom, and they're not doing it. And so you come in and you talk about the fact they're not going to get to go to the movies this afternoon with their friends if they don't clean up the room. And then you start to explain to them that having a clean room is a blessing. It's something that's very important. It's important for their hygiene. You don't want them to catch diseases or get meningitis. You don't want the public health department to have to come by and fumigate the house because their room stinks, and so on. So you're going on endlessly explaining to this child why they need to clean their bedroom. This is the absolutely wrong approach to take with ADHD. Why? Because ADHD delays the development of the ability to use language to control yourself. That's right. ADHD children are delayed in the development of that internal voice that allows us to use language to guide ourselves over time. So it doesn't matter how much language you throw at them and how many rules you give them. They're not going to be as competent at using what you say to get the work done. So one way around this situation is to shut up. Stop talking. Don't talk so much. Or, in the immortal words of my friend Sam Goldstein, act, don't yak. Manage the situation and stop talking. So here's what I want you to do whenever you have to give your child an instruction, a task, a chore, or you just want to praise or reprimand them or give them some feedback. I want you to, first of all, find your child. Don't yell up a flight of stairs or down into the basement, or if you're a teacher, across the classroom. The further away you are from a child when you give an instruction or say something, the less likely it is to have any effect at all upon them. So go to them. Find them. Then I want you to touch them. Because when you touch someone, it gets their attention. It's a sign of intimacy, of importance, and of urgency, but especially intimacy. So it helps with your relationship, and it gets their attention. So put your arm on their arm, put your hand on their hand, put your arm around their shoulder, or in some other way, touch them in a sensitive, compassionate, caring sort of way. Get their attention. This makes what you're about to say more personal and intimate. Then I want you to look them in the eyes. And I want you to look at them as if you mean what you say. I want you to take that Clint Eastwood look of integrity, seriousness, of intent, of you mean business. So just like Clint Eastwood, look them in the eye and be serious about it. Then briefly, and notice I've bolded that word because that's crucial, briefly say what you want to say. Keep it short, keep it sweet, make it businesslike, but get to the point. Stop adding in verbiage. Make it as short as possible. So if it's praise, keep it short. If it's an instruction, keep it brief. If you need to, write it down and hand it to them on a card so that they know what you're asking them to do. If it's a reprimand, get to the point, make it businesslike, but keep it short. It's the brevity that counts, because the next thing you're going to do is back it up. You're going to act, not yak. The longer you talk, the longer you delay the consequences. More talk is not the answer. So, don't delay the consequences. Keep your instructions, your praise, and your reprimands brief. If it's appropriate, have your child repeat back to them, or to you rather, what you have just said to them. That's another way of reinforcing the comment, the instruction, or the rule, or the command. Have them say it back to you. So, besides acting and not yakking, I want you to become more proactive. Being proactive as a parent means that you think about problems or situations. You anticipate them as they're about to occur, and you have a plan for what you're going to do. And just as important, you have shared that plan with your child. Most parents go throughout their day in reactive mode. They're going about doing things they need to get done, and only when a problem happens do they stop what they're doing, interrupt it, and have to deal with the problem behavior. That is being reactive. And although I know that all of us have to be reactive from time to time, you could cut down your problems dramatically if you would shift into proactive mode. And then you wouldn't have to be so reactive. You wouldn't have to have things that were so disruptive to your day. You would in fact find that the day goes more smoothly, and situations like homework and chores go along much better. So be proactive. Anticipate, prepare for problem situations, and have a plan. So I want you to think about each day being more proactive than reactive. I want you to take a couple of problem situations your child has and think about them. Think about what happens in those situations. Think about not just what the problem is, but what alternative positive behavior you want. What's your plan? What are the rules? What do you want your child to do? What are you going to do to see that it happens? So think about a visit to a store, or a mall, or a restaurant, or church, or going to someone's home, or the other things that you see listed on this slide. What do you want? What are the rules? What are the consequences? Now, knowing that, you're going to set up the situation the next time you're about to go into that place, and you're going to use a transition plan. So I want you to think about what you could do before you enter that situation to head off a potential problem, and develop your plan. Now, once you have your transition plan, the next time you enter that situation, the first thing you're going to do before you start into that situation is implement your transition plan. Let's see how that's done. A transition plan begins by stopping. Before you touch a door to a store, or a church, or a restaurant, or a car trip, before you get out the books for homework, before you assign your child a chore, stop for a moment. Wait before you start into that situation. Now review with your child a few rules about what you expect them to do in that situation. If you're about to go into a store, you might stop your child and have them say, or say to them rather, I want you to stand close, don't touch anything, stay next to me. Stand close, don't touch, don't beg. These could be rules that you review with your child before entering any shopping situation. Now, have them say those few rules back to them. If you need to, write those rules down on a card before you go out on that trip, and now's the time to hand that card to your child with the rules on them. Remember, keep the rules short, don't have too many rules, make them the most important ones. But here, the most important thing is go over the rules before you start the situation. Next, explain what your child can earn. What's the incentive here? What's the motivation? Remember, they have an internal motivation deficit. What are you offering in order to increase the likelihood that they're going to obey your rules? So are you going to give them tokens? Are they going to earn points in a point program? Are you going to have them buy something such as a small treat or snack or toy? Are you going to stop off at maybe a restaurant on the way home, such as McDonald's or some fast food place? What's the reward that you're offering here? Explain it to your child. Here again, have them say it back. If I behave myself, I'm going to earn X. This enhances their motivation. We're not done yet. Don't enter the store yet. Instead, explain the punishment. What's going to happen? What's the cost? What are they going to lose if they break the rules? Have them repeat it back. Are you going to take points away? Tokens away? Are they going to lose the privilege? Are you going to put them in timeout in the store? All of these are good things for punishment. What are you going to do? Again, explain it to your child, and if necessary, have them repeat back what the punishment's going to be. Okay, so you've explained the rules, you've explained the incentives, you've explained the punishment, and each time If it's helpful, you've had your child repeat these things back to you. Now, finally, give them something to do. ADHD children are touchers. They love to go about and manipulate things in a particular situation. They're impulsive, they're active, they're restless, and they like to explore and touch things. So, instead of going into a store or a restaurant or a situation without anything specific for them to do, particularly with their hands, bring something along for them to manipulate. Something that they can do. Or if you haven't done that, then give them some things to do to help you with the trip. Like, can they help you get things off the grocery store shelves? Can they help you retrieve something at the end of the aisle? Can they help you push the cart, carry your purse, or something? In other words, keep those hands busy. Busy hands are happy hands, as you know. Now, enter the situation, follow your plan. And I want you to give your child frequent feedback throughout the trip. Don't just wait till the end of the situation, the end of the task or the chore or the trip. Give them frequent feedback throughout the trip. Praise them. If you're giving points or tokens, give them out frequently, every few minutes throughout the trip for how well they're behaving. And then at the end of the situation, evaluate with your child, how well did it go? Ask them, what do you think? How'd we do here? So review with the child. Was it a success? Was it a failure? What can we do the next time? So to repeat, a transition plan means stop before you enter any situation. Review with your child the rules for the situation. Write them down if you need to. Go over the rewards, go over the punishments, and give them something physical to do with those hands, and then enter the situation. Follow your plan and give them feedback throughout the task for how well they're doing. You will find that you will cut down your problems by more than 50% if you will become proactive and do transition planning. Now, another principle that follows up on the others that I've spoken about here in this lecture is that your child needs to have more accountability to other people for the things that they do than a normal child requires. ADHD makes so that children are less able to work independently of structure, of supervision, of accountability, especially over long periods of time. Because they can't persist over time, because their motivation is weak, because their working memory is poor, these are all of the things that allow a child to work independently over time with few consequences. And your child doesn't have those capacities as well as others. So one way to deal with those limitations is to make them more accountable to you and other adults more often throughout the task and across the day than another child would require. You can do this first of all by doing things that we've already talked about. Break tasks into shorter work periods, shorter quotas. Remember the 10 and 3 rule. 10 minutes of work, 3 minutes of break. And during the break, check in on them or have them check with you. Accountability. Or with a young child, the 5 and 2 rule. 5 minutes of work, and then 2 minutes of activity, of break from the work with accountability built in so that they're checking in with people for how they're doing. During the check-in, review the goals, go over the work, what did they promise to do, how much of it has gotten done. So again, it's review the goals and the work at each checkpoint. So check back with your child more often throughout the work period and at the end of each period to review how much they've gotten done. You can also ask them how much they think they can get done in the next 5 or 10 minutes. Children are more likely to do goals that they've set for themselves than goals that are imposed upon them by others. So have your child set the work goal if necessary. Give them positive feedback for attaining these short-term goals at each break point. If they are not successful, that tells you that the work period is too long. Break the interval down into shorter intervals with more frequent breaks and accountability. And then as they succeed at these shorter periods, you can begin to lengthen the work period that you give them before you check in with them. So start with small work periods and increase the work period upward. If you find that it's not working, go backward. Break the work period into shorter units because your child is telling you that they can't work that long without being held accountable for what they're doing. So again, remember the 10 and 3 rule or the 5 and 2 rule for younger children. 10 minutes of work, 3-minute break with accountability during the break. Now, another rule I'd like you to follow is to keep a sense of priorities. This really has more to do with attitude than with specific tactics or ways of managing your child. The attitude is this. Remember that a lot of the work that we assign to children is not very important in the long run. Making a bed, emptying a dishwasher, feeding the dog, they're necessary things, but they're the scut work of life, and they don't add up to greater future success. They still have to be done, and I'm not saying that they don't, but I'm saying that they are of much less importance than more important things like getting your school homework done, getting along with other people in the family, not lying about things and telling the truth, not fighting or hitting other people, but getting along peacefully with them. Those are important things in life. So I prefer that you focus on those things rather than on simple chores and busy bee work like making a bed or emptying a dishwasher or setting the table. I want you to have a sense of priorities. And for a couple of weeks, I would like you to not ask your children to do the low priority things and instead focus on the high priorities. So, instead of giving them lots of trivial little things to do, which simply adds up to more and more problems because they're not going to do most of them for you, get rid of those things. Stop asking them to do those things. Don't ask them to make their bed for a week or that sort of thing. If it bothers you, close the door. We'll clean it up on Saturday morning. But the point is, fight the battles that are worth fighting and let the other ones go for a while. Focus on the big fights, the big important things, so to speak, the big tasks and chores, and let the little things go. Okay? Keep it simple. Know what to focus upon and what to let go. Now, eliminate giving those trivial assignments and tasks and chores for a while and just focus on the specific important things, like getting along with your siblings, telling the truth, getting your homework done, being ready for school in the morning, and so on. Those are important things. Focus. Now, besides focusing on the priorities in life and letting the little trivial things go, another approach or another principle that I find useful, and also that's part of your attitude toward your child, is to maintain a disability perspective, which simply means to remember that ADHD is a neurological and genetic disorder that delays your child's capacities for self-control and for developing independence from others. Your child has a disability. The more you keep this in mind, the more likely you are to respond to your child's difficulties with support, with guidance, and with compassion. The less likely you are to develop the attitude that your child is doing this intentionally in order to spite you, that your child is otherwise normal, and if you can just find the magic bullet or the secret method for dealing with them, that they will become automatically normal in their behavior. And I'm sorry, that's simply just not going to happen. So I want you to keep in mind that you are raising a disabled child. You are a shepherd to an individual with a disability. You keep that in mind, and I think you're going to have a much more supportive and compassionate view of this child. I also want you to remember a rule that I taught in one of my other lectures. That is the 30% rule. This rule comes about because if you want to know where your child is in developing their self-control and independence from you, subtract their age by 30%. That is to subtract 30% off their age, and you'll know where your child's self-control age is. We call this their executive age, the age of their natural self-regulation. It's about 30% younger. So simply consider this. If you have a 10-year-old child, they have the executive age, the level of self-control of someone who's about 7. Now, once you understand that, it makes perfect sense why they're having the difficulties they're having, why they're not able to act like the other 10-year-olds do, why they're not able to follow through on your rules and instructions as well as other 10-year-olds, why they can't seem to get along in the community without your supervision as well as other people are able to do of their age. It all makes perfect sense. Just subtract 30% off their age, and now you know where they are. That is the level they're capable of. And what that means is that you have to rearrange the environment, and you have to reduce your expectations down to that level. And if you will do that, you will reduce a great deal of conflict you are having with this child. Your expectations need to match your child's capacities. And if you expect them to act like other children of their age do, then there's a mismatch between what you expect and what they can deliver. So, the simplest solution to solving that conflict or that disparity is to lower your expectations and to look at your child as if they were someone much younger. Now, what would you do for a 7-year-old in that situation? What would you expect of them? What kind of chores would you give them? How long would the assignment be? How much work would they have to do before they got a break or a reward? By reducing their age by 30%, it really does help you think about these very specific things that you're asking your child to do and how you could change them to make your child more successful and better able to deal with those situations. And it would also help to reduce the potential conflict that you're going to have with your child because you've now matched your expectation down to their actual abilities. You have followed the 30% rule. So follow that rule and remember that your child has a neurologic and a genetic disorder. This is not a choice. They didn't ask to be that way. Snapping your fingers isn't going to get them out of it. Surfing the internet for the next silver bullet or the next magic cure isn't going to make them normal. This is the way your life is. This is the child you've been blessed with. Your child has a disability, and the sooner you accept this disability, the more compassion you're going to have, and the quicker you're going to get down to business, following the 30% rule, readjusting your expectations, re-altering responsibilities and situations and chores and tasks to fit with your child's executive age. And by doing that, you're going to have a lot less conflict. For instance, let's say you have a child who's 10 years of age, and they've come home with a lengthy homework assignment that's normal for a 10-year-old, but it's not normal for a 7-year-old. You are now going to have to break this task down into 7-year-old length assignments, or have a meeting with the school and discuss this issue with them and teach them the 30% rule that your child is not capable of doing assignments that are as long as that of other children. Those assignments are going to need to be broken down to 7-year-old length, to 7-year-old levels of organization and accountability. Let's suppose you have a 14-year-old ADHD daughter, and she's been asked to babysit next door for a young couple that has a 3-month-old baby because they wish to go out on a date or go to dinner. Is this something you should let your daughter do? Well, if she's 14 and she doesn't have ADHD, probably, especially if she's gone through such a course like the Red Cross babysitting course for girls, for instance. But the fact is, your child isn't normal. So reduce her age by 30%. She's a lot more like someone who's about 9 or 10 years of age. Now ask the question again. Should you let a 9 or 10-year-old babysit a 3-month-old without any supervision? And the answer is obvious. No, you don't. Not without supervision. So, maybe she doesn't babysit for a while. Or if she does, you go with her to teach her how to do this, to supervise her, to check out just how able she is to handle this situation. But notice what the 30% rule does. It makes you evaluate the expectation a second time to make sure that it is suitable for someone whose executive age is 30% younger. Let's suppose your teenager wants to get their driver's license at 16. Should they? Follow the 30% rule. Apply it here and you will find that you're about to give somebody who's 11 years of age a driver's license. The ability to drive independently with a motor vehicle. Well, we don't let 11-year-olds drive independently. So you've just answered your own question. No, you're not going to let this teenager drive independently at 16. You're going to get them to get a learner's permit, and you're going to supervise them more closely, and you're going to follow a graduated licensing system where over 2 years they're going to show you how well they drive, and you're going to loosen up the supervision and accountability over that period of time. But the point is this. You're not going to let them simply enter that situation with that new responsibility without having followed the 30% rule first and seeing whether or not it was appropriate for them to do so. So remember that your child has a disability. Keep that perspective in mind. Apply the 30% rule, and you'll know what to do. Now, one of my last principles here that I'd like you to think about is, again, another one not just of method or technique, although it involves some of that too, but one of attitude and perspective. I want you to get good at practicing forgiveness. Forgiveness means three things. Let's take a look at each of the three parts. First of all, let's take a look at the fact that you are going to make mistakes at managing your child. We all do. And the funny thing about raising a child with ADHD is we tend to make more mistakes because they pose more problems for us. They're more of a challenge. And that creates more opportunities for us to mess up as parents. The important point here is not making mistakes. You're not a perfect parent. I'm not. No expert is, and you certainly aren't. You're going to have occasional screw-ups. You're going to say something wrong, or out of anger, you're going to do something that's wrong. The important point here is not that you made a mistake. We all make them. The important point is, do you try to get it right the next time? So, forgive yourself your mistakes. Think about them. Look at what you could do the next time so that you don't make that mistake again. What's important is that we try to strive to be better people, not that we be perfect people. You're going to make a lot of mistakes as a parent of an ADHD child. You better get good at forgiving yourself your mistakes. But that doesn't let you off the hook. You're back on the hook because it's now your responsibility to try to be better the next time, to handle it differently so that you get it right the next time around. Now, just as you are going to make mistakes, other people are going to make mistakes in judging your child with ADHD. They don't know ADHD. They don't know that it's neurobiological. They don't know that your child has a disability. And oftentimes they're going to be very quick to misjudge your child. You had better get good at forgiving strangers and other people who observe your child and may make comments about your child that are hurtful. You better get good at forgiving them their ignorance about ADHD. One of the best things we can do is to help educate other people about ADHD. But you're still going to encounter people when you're out in public or when visitors come to your home that don't understand this disorder and are going to be very quick to reach a snap judgment about your child. Let it go. Don't hold it against them. Forgive them, for they know not what they say, so to speak. You're going to have to develop a thick skin, protect your ADHD child where you can, and get over it. So get good at forgiving other people their misunderstanding. And finally, and I think most importantly, you had better get good at practicing forgiveness with your child, because like you, they are going to make mistakes. And what is important is not that they made a mistake, that they had a failure. What's important is, do we help them try to get it right and be better people the next time around? So, do we work on improving our mistakes and getting better as people? That's what's important here with your child. So you better get good at forgiving them the daily mistakes they're going to make, the misbehaviors, and so on. You're going to focus instead on what could we do the next time so this doesn't happen again, or certainly less likely to do so. Go back and think about those proactive strategies like transition planning. Maybe that'll help you. But the point here is, get over it. The mistake happened. You've dealt with it. Don't hold it against your child. Don't let these spiteful feelings build up inside you, because they are the beginnings of an attitude that could lead you toward physical or emotional abuse. So remind yourself that your child has a disability. Take the disability perspective. Forgive them the mistakes they're making. Try to get it right the next time. If you find you're having trouble doing this, then here's something you can try doing. At the end of the day, have a daily exorcism when your child has gone to bed. Excuse me. What do I mean by an exorcism? I want you to sit down with a piece of paper. I want you to write down in a list form every mistake your child made, every misbehavior, every stressful situation. Write it down. Get it out of you. Exorcise the demons. Now, I want you to take the paper, step outside on your porch, take a match, light the paper, and burn it up. You're going to have an exorcism. You are burning up the day's problems. There it is. They're gone. You got it off your chest. It's over. And in that burst of fire, let it go. There are various ways of doing this. You can put it down the garbage disposal instead of lighting a match or something like that. But you get the point. At the end of the day, review the problems. Let it go. The other thing I want you to do is to find ways of restoring and maintaining a more positive perspective about your child. For instance, Did your child go out and pick some flowers spontaneously and bring them in and give them to you? Get your camera, quickly, take a picture. Print this out and put this picture on your refrigerator and look at it every day. That's your child. That's the inner child you know. That's the child you love. That's the one you're dealing with. So use this positive image of something your child did for you in order to restore your view of them, particularly in situations that are stressful or where things are going wrong or where you've had some conflict with this child. Use it to remind you of who they are. And if you have trouble even with that, then another way you can restore that positive view, particularly for a younger child, is wait till they've gone to bed and they fall asleep. Now, quietly, tiptoe into their bedroom. Leave the door slightly ajar so you can see them. Sit down on the floor and watch them sleep. There is nothing more innocent. There is nothing that restores your view of your child more than watching a young child sleep. This is your child, the gift that you've been given. Forgive them the mistakes they've made that day. This is your real child. So these are various strategies of helping you cope with the stress that these children are going to pose for you. And one of the best ways of coping with that is to practice forgiveness of yourself, of others, and especially of your ADHD child for their mistakes. So let's review what we've learned very quickly here. We've learned that understanding and managing a child with ADHD can be boiled down to following these 12 basic principles of parenting. By following these principles, you will do as well as you can as a parent to raise a happier, more effective, and well-adjusted child. You will also be a more supportive parent, and you are contributing to a more peaceful family situation. And finally, keep this in mind. You are also building the foundation for a lifelong, positive, close relationship or bond with your child that will sustain both of you across your lives. And isn't that the most important thing? Thank you for taking this lecture. I hope that you've learned something useful from this presentation. Please take other presentations on this website if you wish, or look for other books that I have for parents on this website. Thank you again, and goodbye.